for the today's webinar. Uh, it is an honor and privilege for me to introduce Dr. Queen Aditya. Dr. Queen Aditya is the speaker for today's webinar, and she is a consultant gynecologist at AMRI Hospital, Kolkata, Narayan Memorial Hospital, Kolkata, Behala Balananda Brahmachari Hospital, and Kasturi Medical Center, Kolkata. Her special interests are in gynae endocrinology, vaginal surgeries, and high-risk obstetrics. Dr. Queen has received APJ Abdul Kalam Award of Appreciation from Delhi Gynecologist Forum in 2015, and she is the East Zone Coordinator for FOXY Sexual Health Committee 2020. She has a number of publications and she is a guest editor of Your Health of IMA for the month of July 2018. Before I hand it over to Dr. Queen, a word or two about the company, where at Acumentis, we are more of dealing with women's healthcare products, and our forte is women's healthcare. As far as our division is concerned, which is Harmonica, primarily we are focusing on your medical management of fibroids, then of course endometriosis, and of course PCOS management. We are shortly coming into the postpartum hemorrhage therapy also. But as of today, Dr. Queen, over to you for talking on the medical management of fibroids. And as you have rightly said in your post, which you have put it in the social media, which says that fibroids are no more a scare. It can be treated by medicines which are now available. Over to Dr. Queen.
Thank you, Shubhajit sir, for these very, very kind words of introduction. And yes, as you rightly said, my aim, I won't say it's my aim today for the doctors, because as doctors we understand, but for the lay public, the very name that I have a fibroid will make them count their sleepless nights. The whole family is totally traumatized, that they think maybe it's some cancer that they're suffering from. They think maybe they're going to lose their lives. Maybe without surgery, they will not be able to manage. So it is the lay public should actually come to know that in today's day, fibroid is not as scary as it used to be a few decades back. Now we have a good number of medical management was tried, and now we have this very good molecule with us, which we are using without any side effects, hardly any side effects, if at all. And along with that, it is giving us very good results. The main problems that is the fibroid associated quality of life that was so poor, which WHO and all of the august bodies have found out that quality of life really improves with this medication. And in many cases, we are able to totally avoid the surgery. In some cases, we are able to stall the surgery. She is bleeding heavily, but whatever circumstances, probably she's not able to undergo a surgery right now. So we can at least postpone or stall the surgery for a good number of months. In many of the cases, we're totally able to avoid surgery. So awareness about this in the public forum is as such important, and that's why I keep trying to do that. Right now, for us, we all know what medical management is available. We're just going to talk about that in a little bit more of detail.
Sure, ma'am. Please continue.
Just give me a minute for the full screen. Yeah. So we are talking about, basically we will be talking about low dose mifepristone in the management of uterine fibroids, but we will be also giving an overview about the general medical management of fibroids, and about all the modes of therapy that are possible that we actually like to follow. Dr. Das and Udayanda both together are going to follow it up with a large and detailed panel. But for the time being, we're going to talk about the medical management, and with special emphasis and focus on mifepristone, which is used by us nowadays. as we the clinicians, we the gynecologists all understand what a fibroid is, but we must understand that 40% of women over 40 years of age have these fibroids, and nearly 20 to 30% of Indian women in the reproductive age group are suffering from the fibroid. And at any given time, 15 to 25 million Indian women are suffering from this condition. And as I already said, in the public, as far as the public is concerned, the very word fibroid makes them, go totally scared. So, and thinking that either I'll die, maybe it's a cancer. If they understand it's not a cancer, okay, then I need a surgery. And it becomes a very scary situation, which now, fortunately, with the advent of better medication, we are able to manage a good number of cases medically alone. The types, as we all understand, this is the classification that we all are going to follow, the PIGO classification. And we all understand that the pedunculated intracavitary is called stage 1, type 1. And then the other submucosal will be, one will be less than 50% is intramural. That is mostly it is jutting into the uterine cavity. Then 2 will be more than 50% is intramural. That is, there is just a little bit of indentation in the uterine cavity, but most of it is inside the myometrium. Type 3 is it is intramural, but it is touching the endometrium. And type 4 is totally intramural without touching the endometrium at all. Type 5 is the subserosal with more than 50% is intramyometrial. That is less than 50% is jutting outside the uterine cavity. Type 6 is where more than 50% is outside the intramural, outside the cavity. That is less than 50% is within the intramyometrial part. And 7 is the opposite of 0, where it is serous pedunculated. And if there is any other type, then that is classified as type 8. The risk factors also, we all understand, that is the early age of menarche, late reproductive years, obesity, family history. And as we understand that the blacks are affected more than the whites are. Symptoms, as we all face in our clinical practice, might be menorrhagia, pelvic pain, menometrorrhagia, dysmenorrhea, anemia, infertility because of a good number of causes in many patients, not all. Patients do come to all of us saying that I am suffering from fibroid. That means I will not be able to conceive. So that counseling also we have to do, that the very mere fact that she is having a fibroid, that without the proper mapping, does not mean that she is infertile. So this also counseling we'll have to do to them. Only after we ourselves are convinced with a proper location of the fibroid, how much is intracavitary, how much is not, with all of these, or whether it's near the cornu, with these kind of information, then only we should warn them that yes, maybe fertility might be an issue. But the mere fact that she is suffering from fibroid means that she cannot conceive is a misconception amongst a good number of the people. And we have to counsel them accordingly and reduce the amount of scare, like they're scared, that they're really, really petrified by the situation. So we have to counsel them properly. And as we understand, when large fibroids can cause bowel and bladder problems as well. Why there can be infertility, that is, there can be an interference with sperm or over transport. As we understand, there is miniature contraction of the uterine musculature, but when fibroids are interrupting that, that can also harm the ascent of the sperm. Technically, that is possible. Enlargement and deformity of the uterine cavity, distortion of the cervix, distortion of the tubal ostia. Once the conception happens, if it is implanted over the fibroid site, the vascularity can really be hampered, and thereby there can be increased chance of miscarriage. The risk of obstetrical complications can also be there because of the fibroid per se, or because in some cases they may grow. In up to 30% of cases they grow, and that growth and the position that it is harboring, that can also increase the risk of the various obstetrical complications. Now, the management options are the surgical options, the non-surgical, that is the uterine artery embolization, fibroid ablation, and all of those. And surgical will be hysterectomy, laparoscopic, or hysteroscopic myomectomy. And then coming to the medical options, which are nowadays available to us, the symptomatic therapy will include OCPs, progesterones, NSAIDs, tranexamic acid, and so on. And the specific medication that will treat the etiology will be the GnRH analogs, which we have been using for quite some time, and the selective progesterone receptor modulators, which now we are going to talk about in detail. The drawbacks of the various surgical therapy, as clinicians, as surgeons, we understand there is inherent risk to every surgery. so on. Also in hysterectomy, the surgical morbidity, the risk of surgical long-term complications, adhesions, incontinence, any injury, all of that is there. And once the uterus is removed, then obviously the fertility will only be possible with a surrogate. And that is if the ovaries are preserved. If the ovaries, if there's a TAH-BSO or any other TLH, then there is total loss of that function. And unfortunately, I have come across cases in my life where they have been to other doctors, and why those doctors had done so, I don't know. But when they came to us in their late 30s, about to be married, already the TAH-BSO has been done. I have got at least 5 cases in my lifetime. So unfortunately, that is also a situation that we can land up in. When it has already been done, then there's nothing we can do about it. Myomectomy, there can be a huge possibility of recurrence of the fibroid. And there can be a potential uterine rupture during pregnancy, delivery. There can be damage to the endometrium also inadvertently, and which can give rise to infertility also subsequently. Or in case there is an implantation, there can be implantation failure also. When we are talking about the uterine artery embolization, it seems to be very good, but there are disadvantages. There can be recurrence of the fibroid pain and all of that, post-embolization syndrome, possibility of severe complications. There can be uterine synecdoche. There can be premature ovarian failure. All of these things can happen after UAE. So in young patients who are desirous of fertility, it is not one of the primary modes of therapy. So the limitations of the existing medical therapy is oral progestins like norethisternone can cause breakthrough bleeding, can also increase the size of the myoma. And we know that it is progesterone dependent. So giving the progesterone itself can be counterproductive. Injectable progestins like depomedroxyprogesterone acetate, along with weight gain and irregular bleeding, we all know that it can cause a lot of loss of bone mineral density. A lot of us have seen this in our practice. COCs again can increase the size of the myoma, so I think it can be more counterproductive than actually beneficial. GnRH analogs is a very, very good mode of treatment, because it gives good results. It can even shrink the size of the fibroid. But as we understand that it has severe anti-androgenic effects, and thereby it can give rise to loss of bone mineral density, can even give rise to osteoporosis. And its use is limited to 6 months unless we give ADVAC. And when we are giving ADVAC, again, it is becoming counterproductive. Pulipristal acetate, we are not going to talk about much at all, because there have been reports of liver failure, including cases requiring transplant. In some cases, I have heard of uterine hyperplasia leading to early stage carcinoma endometrium, and in our country currently it is totally banned. Udayan sir just now had shared with me, and I'm sure many of you already know this, that the latest guidelines 2020 November probably are telling us that it can be used with caution in some countries as a last resort where surgery is not possible, and all the other medications for some reason or the other are contraindicated, which is almost an impossible situation. I mean, when the other medications are all contraindicated, then probably this will also be contraindicated. But theoretically, that is the only possibility of using it. In our country currently, there is no scope, because it has already been taken out of the market. So the functional role of estrogen and progesterone is that we all understand that fibroids overexpress estrogen and progesterone receptors. That is the estrogen receptor A and B and progesterone A and B. Progesterone plays a very vital role in promoting the uterine fibroid growth. Progesterone receptor binding is 3 times higher in the fibroid as in the myometrium. This is the main action of progesterone that we are going to play on. Estrogen receptor expression on uterine cells is inhibited by the progesterone receptor pathway. So progesterone effect on the fibroids is that progesterone stimulates the growth of the fibroid by upregulating the B cell lymphoma 2 marker, the epidermal growth factor. It stimulates these two, and it negates or downregulates tumor necrosis factor alpha expression. So what is happening because of these 3 effects is that as BCL2 expression is increased, it inhibits apoptosis. As the EGF expression is increased, it increases angiogenesis. We all know that epidermal growth factor is associated with angiogenesis, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is going to cause, which is going to inhibit the cell proliferation that is being inhibited, thereby the fibroid cell proliferation is enhanced. So by these three mechanisms mainly, progesterone causes increase in the size growth of the myoma. So now SPRM is an innovative therapy in uterine fibroid management because we've already spoken about the role of progesterone. On the normal myometrium, it does not have too much of an inhibitory effect. It might help in the growth, which is absolutely okay with us. But as far as the fibroid is concerned, there are more receptors on the fibroid, and thereby when it has its inhibitory effect on it, it will help in shrinkage of the fibroid or will stop the growth of the fibroid. So the first selective progesterone receptor modulator is the mifepristone, and it has anti-progesterone action on the fibroid. Its use for uterine fibroids has been studied worldwide. Several clinical trials, including several in India ourselves. I'm very gladly going to speak about Dr. Alka Kriplani's trials that she did, I think somewhere 10, 12 years, or maybe 15 years ago, when this thing, mifepristone, was introduced in India only for abortion. At that time, they managed to break the tablet by the pharmacy department, and they took the help of the pharmacology department and broke them into small parts. At that time, it was very difficult to break the 200 milligram into 25 and 10 milligram, but they had done that job and they had given it as a trial, and it was a hugely successful trial. Since Dr. Alka Kriplani ma'am is very close to me personally, I take great pride in talking about her views, in presenting her views, which I will speak about in the future slides. So they had studied both 10 and 25 milligrams, and it has been found that 10 milligram is also effective, and effective to decrease menorrhagia, dysmenorrhea, pelvic pain, and the other symptoms as well. Mechanism of action can be so many. GnRH analog works only on the pituitary, but this particular mifepristone works at the level of the fibroid. I already mentioned those three ways that progesterone enhances the growth of the fibroid. It will oppose all of them, and thereby it will cause reduction or will stop the growth. Endometrium, it stops uterine bleeding. It results in benign. This is something, this benign change is called PAEC, that is progesterone receptor modulator associated endometrial changes, but these are benign, and once the medication is stopped, within a few months it comes back to normal. These changes are limited, self-limiting, and they are reversible. And it also has a role on the pituitary. So it has a role on the fibroids, the endometrium, and the pituitary, as opposed to GnRH analogs, which only acts on the pituitary. So the advantages of the low dose mifepristone over the other therapies is that it is as effective as GnRH analog, but it has no effect on the bone mineral density, no risk of osteoporosis, unlike GnRH analogs. Less side effects. Oral route of administration is obviously going to increase the patient compliance. It gives us, it helps us to buy time to correct anemia and to plan surgery when eventually a surgery is being done. But as I already mentioned, in so many of our cases, we are not having to do the surgery at all because the patient is absolutely fine with this mode of treatment, and we can continue it for a long period of time. Menses usually revert within a month or so after stopping the therapy. The lesser recurrence of fibroids is also reported as compared to the GnRH analogs, and it improves the health-related quality of life. Cochrane, our own Indian journal, and Fertility Sterility, all of them are speaking about low dose mifepristone in the treatment of fibroids. Cochrane is telling us that about the endometrial changes which are benign, and it is saying that it is an effective treatment for the woman with symptoms of fibroids. And what they are concluding is that mifepristone reduce heavy menstrual bleeding and improve the fibroid specific quality of life, though in whatever they are talking about, there was no shrinkage in the size, according to Cochrane, of the fibroids, but the quality, fibroid specific quality of life definitely improved, and it also gave the patient a lot of relief from the heavy menstrual bleeding. Now, coming to the systematic review of mifepristone for the treatment of uterine leiomyoma, this study concludes that the published trials of mifepristone showed reduction in leiomyoma size and improvement in the symptoms. This other paper from Fertility Sterility concludes that daily treatment with mifepristone for 3 to 6 months as an optimum clinical treatment for leiomyoma is what they recommend. And what they were talking about, insufficient evidence of atypical endometrial hypoplasia. There was a question whether there is hypoplasia, but they did not find any such thing. And as I mentioned, probably any such thing does not happen. It is only the PAEC, which is reversible and self-limiting. When we talk of the several international studies, then we find San Diego, California, they found a reduction by 40%, and those receiving leuprolide had a reduction in 21% as far as the uterine artery blood flow was concerned. This study in Rochester, New York, showed that 42% became amenorrheic and adjusted uterine size was reduced by 47%. And there was no endometrial hypoplasia. And another study in China spoke about lesser recurrence rate with mifepristone compared to GnRH analogs. So 17 compared to 40 is a huge change. So guidelines and textbook recommendations. The Canadian Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they are saying they're talking about effective medical treatments for women with abnormal uterine bleeding associated with uterine fibroids include selective progesterone receptor modulators. And in women who present with acute uterine bleeding associated with uterine fibroids, conservative management can be done, and selective progesterone receptor modulators have been spoken about. The Gynae Endocrine Society of India is also talking about low-dose mifepristone treatment for abnormal uterine bleeding and fibroid. They are talking about the newer medical options, that is the low-dose mifepristone currently. That time it was not available, but now luckily we have it very easily available to us. Textbooks are also talking about it. We all know Dr. Duru Shah, her textbook. So many other books are also mentioning the role of mifepristone in the medical management of fibroids. And our Indian clinical evidence. So this is what I was talking about. Dr. Alka Kriplani ma'am, they had studied this in AIIMS, and here they had a good number of women, 143 women with symptomatic myoma, 5 to 15 centimeters. They excluded those women whose uterine size was more than 20 weeks. So they had given two groups, 25 milligrams per day and 10 milligrams per day. And the outcome they found was that reduction in myoma and uterine volume, pain using the visual analog score, and the reduction in blood loss using pictorial blood loss assessment chart. And also they did an endometrial biopsy in all the cases. And they found significant rise in hemoglobin levels in both the groups with treatment, and almost similar results with the 10 and the 25 milligrams. And there was marked benefit as far as dysmenorrhea, pain, backache, and dyspareunia was concerned, which we compare group 1 and group 2, that is the 25 and the 10 milligram. So what they concluded was that, and their repeat endometrial histopathology didn't reveal any complex hyperplasia or atypia in either of the groups. So as far as the endometrial biopsy was concerned, it was more or less very, very safe in all of the cases. And they concluded that mifepristone, both the 10 and the 25 milligram, caused symptomatic relief with a lot of reduction in menstrual blood. Great myoma size reduction occurred with the 25 milligrams dose. Okay, the myoma size probably was slightly more shrunken with the 25 than the 10 milligram, but overall results were more or less the same. Amenorrhea was developed in up to 95% cases, and which was obviously reversible, and it can be a reasonable choice for management of uterine leiomyomas as it is administered orally, cost effective, and hardly any side effects. Mifepristone can be a reasonable choice, especially in perimenopausal women in whom myomas would regress anyways after menopause, and just buying time till the menopause is actually happening, and thereby we can avoid a surgery in women who are otherwise suffering very badly at this time. So another Indian study, 2019, pretty recent study of 54 women aged more than 18 years. They were given mifepristone 25 milligrams 2 to 4 cycle, what they did was prolonged treatment. 3 months treatment from day 5, 1 month of gap. Then again 3 months treatment. Like this, they had gone up to 12 months of mifepristone. And the patients were followed up every 3 months. And they found a huge change or shrinkage in the fibroid size. Hemoglobin was increased. There was an increased treatment duration, like 3 months, 1 month gap, again 3 months. The longer the treatment was given, the more was the reduction in the size. And more patients responded better with increased duration. So they had no adverse effects. 3 other controlled trials comparing mifepristone with leuprolide showed that mifepristone is an effective medication to shrink the size of the fibroid or to improve the quality of life as compared to the GnRH agonist. Mifepristone is better tolerated than the GnRH agonist and lesser recurrence rate with mifepristone compared to GnRH analog, which I already mentioned in a previous slide. Mifepristone is more effective in decreasing blood flow to the uterus than the GnRH agonist. So the blood flow is also managed better with this. So this other 2019 study was given mifepristone compared to leuprolide acetate, and a marked relief with significant decrease in visual analog score was found in both the groups, but the mifepristone group also had very good effects like reduced bleeding, uterine volume, and myoma volume. And mifepristone can be a good choice, especially in perimenopausal women, which we have been repeatedly talking about, whom myomas would regress anyways after menopause. And so to buy time in those few months before months or maybe a year till she is going to enter the actual menopause, and we can avoid an unnecessary surgery. In the South Indian population also, this study in 2018 also gave us good results. And pain-related symptoms were improved, as we can see, after 6 months. And that is menorrhagia, dysmenorrhea, pelvic pain, backache, urinary retention, all of them were markedly improved over a period of 6 months. And this study in Rohtak had 50 women with symptomatic fibroids were given 10 milligram per day of mifepristone for 3 months. And the outcome was the decreased uterine and fibroid volume measured by the transvaginal sonography, decrease in menstrual and pressure symptoms. And as we see that the uterine volume was reduced markedly, fibroid volume was also reduced markedly. And there was significant reduction in menorrhagia, metrorrhagia, polymenorrhea, dysmenorrhea, all of that. And they concluded that low dose mifepristone had a shrinkage effect on fibroids, which was maintained for as long as the medication was used, and it did allow time to correct anemia and to plan a surgery wherever necessary. In the perimenopausal age group, as I mentioned, we have a good option of using this medication and buying time till the woman goes, the natural menopause, and then thereby there starts shrinkage of the fibroids. So if we can manage to put her on medication at that time, then we might be able to save her from a surgery altogether. So these other studies in India, this is GTB hospital, showed that the uterine volume, leiomyoma and largest leiomyoma volume declined by up to 30%. Another one in Bankura Medical College showed improved quality of life. So most of them are giving us positive results. One from our own college, Eden Hospital Medical College, which showed 100% improvement of menorrhagia in 60% of women, and all patients became amenorrheic. 90%, 94% of the patients showed reduction in the volume of leiomyoma. So all of them are giving us good and positive results. Another college in UP is showing us mean uterine volume reduced by 64%. Another college in Lucknow is talking about complete resolution of complaints such as menorrhagia, polymenorrhagia, polymenorrhea, intermenstrual bleeding, and dysmenorrhea. So Indian clinical trials presented in the conferences about the good beneficial effects of mifepristone. AICOG 2016 had concluded that mifepristone effectively relieves the fibroid symptoms, decreases the size, thereby avoiding unnecessary surgery in perimenopausal women specifically. ASRM 2009 concluded that low dose mifepristone had a shrinkage effect on the fibroids, which was maintained for as long as the medication was continued. ASRM again in 2013 spoke about the reduction in volume and leiomyoma related symptoms of menorrhagia and dysmenorrhea. So case report presented in AICOG 2020 as This was Lucknow. So here this case presentation was there that 48-year-old woman with very low hemoglobin, 5 uterine volume, 592 cc, largest fibroid being around 300 cc, and lots of contraindications to surgery, and that's why it was put on mifepristone. And eventually the uterine volume reduced to around 400 cc, the volume of the largest fibroid reduced to 150, and the hemoglobin from 5 point something came up to 9.5 as well at the end of 3 months. So high risk woman, perimenopausal specifically, this is a very, very good option to prevent altogether a surgery. And safety of mifepristone, up till 50 milligrams per day is reported as safe. No atypical hyperplasia has been found at all. Endometrial biopsies show no premalignant changes, as Dr. Alka had also done in AIMS, and no risk of decrease in bone mineral density and osteoporosis, as we know. It maintains the estrogen somehow in the mid follicular level, thereby severe hypoestrogenic features never occur as far as mifepristone is concerned. Even when we talk about Dionagest in the treatment of endometriosis, we say the same thing. It has a very good effect that it keeps the estrogen in just the optimal level, just below the normal, the lower threshold, just above that. So Dionagest maintains estrogen more or less in the low normal range, and so also is the case with mifepristone. So that severe hypoestrogenic features are not there, and it is much better tolerated by the woman. So the dosage guideline, we all know, should be started within the first few days of the menstrual cycle, because before the progesterone receptors are actually formed in that cycle. So it is before that we should actually go for starting the medication, and it should be taken at the same time every day as for most medication. And the minimum treatment duration should be 3 to 6 months, but it is safe to continue for much longer periods as well. And our Indian study, we showed 3 months and 1 month gap, 3 months, 1 month gap. It's not that 1 month gap is really required. We can continue for months together. But in that particular study, they did it that way and they had good results. So I thank you all for your patient listening. And I'm sure that all of us anyways are using a lot of mifepristone, and we are convinced anyways that mifepristone is a very good molecule. It is present in our armamentarium. Acumentis has given it to us, and it is present there in our basket, very, very freely available. And I am personally using it quite a lot. I'm sure all of you are probably using it to a great extent and getting very good results. Most of my patients are very satisfied with it. And once again, I would like to thank Shubhajit and Khushbu for giving me this grand opportunity. I would like to thank my seniors, Dr. S.K. Das, Udananda, and everyone for having me here today and patiently listening to me. And I would now hand over the session to Shubhajit, if you want to say a word or so. Thank you. You are muted, Shubhajit. Yeah, you are muted. Why can't we hear you?
We can't hear Mr. Shubhajit Mukherjee.
Shubhajit, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay. So thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful session, and a lot of things you
Thank you,
covered. As primarily, like you have brought about the study of Dr. Alka Kriplani. In fact, the study was done when we had not even launched the brand.
That's what I said. When
Yeah,
I was those
absolutely.
days, I was in Delhi, and
Yeah.
then we were all talking about this. That how is Alka ma'am doing it? The tablet
Yeah.
is 200 milligram. That at that time we were wondering how the study is being
Yeah,
taken
yeah.
out. Later on, Alka ma'am
They-
told me that they involved the pharmacology department to break it and then make very minuscule way
Yeah.
making those doses. And it was very difficult to manage it. And then getting a permission also from the
Yeah.
from the ethical committee and all of that. There was a lot of work that they groundwork that they had to do. But eventually, Alka ma'am has presented us with such beautiful data, based upon which we are very confidently using mifepristone in our today's practice.
Absolutely, absolutely, ma'am. And subsequently, a lot of studies have been done. One in Calcutta Medical College also, and in fact, the total trials are 41, which is huge. I mean, if we compare with Ulipristol, I mean, today that molecule has just 3 trials, and we are not talking anything against and also, but today 100% low dose mifepristone has more trials to its credit. And only before we hand over to Dr. Udayan and Dr. SK Das to carry forward the discussion, and Dr. Queen for the panel
Yeah,
discussion.
I will just invite
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah, I just say one thing, that the audience, whoever is watching, we are very eager to do clinical trials with whoever wants to. We have
Yeah,
it,
we are all willing.
absolutely. We are ready with whatever data we can give you. And the more trial we do, it is better for all of us. So whichever doctor wants to do it, just contact our Harmonica representative manager at your place, and absolutely we will give you the go ahead to do the trial. Thank you very much. Over to Dr. Queen now.
Yeah, okay. Can I please have the CV of Dr. SK Das, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, before that, just one thing. Just Dr. Sanju Haldar has really congratulated you for
Yeah,
the
I wanted to say
session.
thank you. I think I already
The-
signaled to her. Thank you, Sanju. And thanks
yeah,
so
and
much
like
for
there's
sparing your time and
one
joining.
question from him. In how small a fibroid can mifepristone be effective? We can take this one question, ma'am.
Yeah, actually what we found in our clinical practice, and also there's a lot of evidence to support that, it is said that fibroids of the smaller variety, that is less than 5 centimeters, probably are going to respond much better to mifepristone compared to the bigger ones. In the bigger ones, the fibroid per se might not respond that much, but the fibroid related quality of life improves, amenorrhea happens. That is why in the larger ones we are also giving. But when we are coming to shrinkage of fibroids, between suppose 2 to 5 centimeters, those kind of fibroids are the ones that will actually shrink. That is what we have found in our practice, and also the literature is supporting the same. The larger fibroids probably do not shrink at all. When we were talking about Ulipristol a few years back, they were saying that the larger fibroids are the main targets for Ulipristol, but now that is totally out of the picture, we're not even talking about it. As far as mifepristone is concerned, with the smaller fibroids, there's a good chance that they shrink, and with the larger fibroids, if the fibroid does not shrink, at least it does not grow. Moreover, because we know that the effect on the progesterone receptors, whatever growth has happened, probably it will not be able to shrink that, but for the time being, it will give the patient a better quality of life because of, and because it is going to stop the bleeding as well. It might reduce the total uterine volume to some extent, and when it stops the bleeding, generally the quality of life of that woman who is suffering so badly will also be improved. So in larger fibroids, it's also not a, it's not anyone's loss. We will gain only something. We can't do a surgery right now, or she's perimenopausal, we want to buy time. So even in those situations, in the large ones also we can try, but with the smaller ones, I have had many cases where there has been good shrinkage. The other day, Dr. Girija Wag was saying that she tried in a case more than 20 centimeters, and surprisingly, she found shrinkage. Those are one-off cases where, yes, if we are fortunate, we can get shrinkage, but it is better not to advocate in really big ones. So I think up to 5-6 centimeters, we can try it with the aim of shrinking. But in the larger ones, the only aim should be to give the patient a better quality of life for the time being.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So I can have.
Yeah.
Can you start now?
So I take this very, very proud privilege to introduce and invite our esteemed senior, Dr. Sushanta Kumar Das, whom we all know, whom we all respect so much. And he is the president of the Burdwan OBGYN Society. And he is the director of Apollo Nursing Home in Burdwan. And thank you so much, sir, for sparing your time today. And I invite you to take over the panel. And henceforth, sir, please also introduce the panelists. Before you take over, I would also like to introduce Udayanta.
Okay. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank
Now,
you.
it's my really, really proud privilege to introduce Dr. Udayan Sarkar, who is like my elder brother. Very, very close we are, and often, take his opinion in so many cases. Like today, also he told me about the Ulipristol. He is the professor, Department of OBGY in the MGM Medical College, Kishanganj. Senior consultant gynecologist in Siliguri, undergraduate and postgraduate examiner, and the honorary secretary, Siliguri Obs and Gynae Society, and he was the organizing secretary of the recently concluded East Zone Yuva Foxy, which they had done in such a grand way. First of all, I have to congratulate Udananda for conducting a wonderful East Zone Yuva Foxy. You really hats off to you. Being a Bengali, I'm feeling so proud on behalf of all of us. And I now would request you and Dr. Das sir to kindly introduce your panelists so that we can start the panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you,
much, Dr.
Thank
Queen.
you.
Now we're going to start the panel. First, actually, I'll give you told everything. Now the panelists are from Bardhaman, Dr. Devdut Banerjee, Dr. Amitabh Pal, and Dr. Amit Dutt. And from Siliguri, Dr. Devdut Banerjee, he was the Associate Professor, Department of Gynecology and Obstetrics, Bardhaman Medical College. And Dr. Amitabh Pal, he was a professor, and he was in Kuch Bihar Medical College. He was the head. Yes, and he was the honorary secretary of Bardhaman Obstetrics Gynecological Society. And Dr. Amit Dutt. Yeah, Dr. Amit Dutt is a professor and postgraduate and undergraduate examiner. He trained in laparoscopic surgery with many publications in national and international journals. He's joint secretary of Bardhaman Obstetrical Society, and he's the faculty of support and other societies. And from Siliguri, Dr. Shatabdi De, yes, Dr. Jamini Agarwal. Dr. Shatabdi De is a fellowship in reproductive medicine, consultant in Nova Infertility Clinic, Siliguri. And Dr. Jamini, yes, Dr. Jamini Agarwal, he is a fellowship in reproductive medicine, Vision Fertility Center, Patna, consultant in Nova Infertility Center, Siliguri, and West Bengal. And I think Dr. Priyankar Rai is not there, and he is in place. Somebody, because he has got some eye problem. So who is?
So let me just add, Dr. Jamini, Dr. Shatabdi, and Dr. Priyankur are brilliant infertility experts in Siliguri, and we totally tend to depend upon them for all our infertility problems. The patients who come with infertility problems, we totally depend on this trio, Dr. Jamini, Dr. Shatabdi, and Dr. Priyankur.
Yeah.
Dr.
Okay.
Priyankur.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, so we'll start the panel discussion now. Now,
Then, sir, you can share the screen.
The first part will be conducted by Dr. Sushanta Kumar Das,
Yeah.
and I'll share my screen after he finishes.
yeah,
Okay, sir. Okay.
I'll discuss first two cases,
Yes.
and then another two cases will be discussed by the Dr. Udayan Shankar. Now,
সুশান্ত স্যার আপনার মাইকটা একটু বাড়িয়ে নিন, একটুখানি ভলিউমটা কম আসছে,
anyway,
একটুখানি কম আসছে আপনার ভলিউমটা।
now actually, I'm going to start the panel discussion. There are few questions. Now, first case, there are four cases actually. So initially, now you, Dr. Queen Aditya gave the description of the uterine fibroid as just in nutshell that uterine fibroids known as uterine myoma, the uterine smooth muscles. The clinical presentation, they usually present with menorrhagia, pelvic masses, pelvic pain, infertility, and obstetrical complications. And nearly 20 to 30% of Indian women in the reproductive age group of about fibroid uterus. And at any time given, nearly 15 to 20 million Indian women have fibroids. Now, figure classification, you told everything, I need not go. Treatment, as you know, the treatment for the uterine, surgical, medical, surgical hysterectomy, myomectomy, URE, and the magnetic wave. And the medical, NSAIDs, antifibrinolytic, genetic analog, progesterone, danazole, COG, and the low dose of mifepristone. Now, case number one. A 23-year-old woman complains of dysmenorrhea, pelvic pain, and low back pain. Examination revealed a single intramural fibroid 4.5 centimeters. Now, which investigation do you perform in this case in favor of clinical diagnosis? Dr. Shatabdi Rai, please. From Siliguri.
Good afternoon,
Which
sir. Good
invest-
afternoon to all of you seniors. Yes, sir. Sir, this is a young female complaining of dysmenorrhea as well as menorrhagia. We just have a diagnosis of the size of the fibroid. So here I would, since she also has menorrhagia, firstly, I would like to find out the status of hemoglobin in her so that I know how much urgent it is to treat her the fibroid. Because if she is anemic and all, we might have to deal with it urgently. If she is not, then we might take some time to go ahead with it. Also, we have to go for a proper ultrasound, a proper TVS for exact mapping of the fibroid, that what is the location of the fibroid, is it intramural, is it submucosal, so that it will help us to decide that what can be our way of managing the fibroid. And since she is a young female, so it is all the more important to do a conservative surgery as much as possible. So my thing would be a routine blood test to find out the hemoglobin, as well as a proper ultrasound and an MRI if required for the proper mapping of the fibroid, so that we can decide our line of management.
Okay, thank you. The next question, what are the now, Dr. Amitabh Uppa, what are the different modalities of treatment? Which investigation do you perform in case of to treat the clinical diagnosis?
So actually, I will have to go history first. 23-year-old woman, dysmenorrhea, there is no menorrhagia. There is pelvic pain and low back pain. So this type of fibroid uterus generally does not 4.4, it does not producing any heavy menstrual bleeding. So we will have to assess along with ultrasonographic diagnosis what are the other causes of dysmenorrhea and pelvic pain. We will have to keep in mind along with the diagnosis of fibroid uterus. So what will we do in this case? We will have to go for investigation for other causes also. Because fibroid uterus may be associated with other conditions of dysmenorrhea like PID, like endometriosis, like adenomyosis. So for that reason, along with the ultrasonography, we will have to go for investigations of MRI to find out the adenomyosis, and we will have to go for laparoscopy to detect whether any PID or whether there is any endometriosis or not. So we will have to think in this line also if the patient comes with 4.4 of this size of fibroid uterus. Next question.
Next question. Now, what are the different modalities of treatment if the patient is infertile with symptomatic myoma? Now, Dr. Agarwal, please. Dr. Jasmine Agarwal, from Siliguri. Jamini Agarwal.
So this patient is just 23 years old,
Yeah.
and she's having symptoms not of menorrhagia, only dysmenorrhea and pelvic pain, and if she's infertile. So I would like to first give her, after doing all the investigations, if other causes are ruled out, I would first like to give her some symptomatic treatment for fibroid like NSAIDs, and if her pain is relieved, then for infertility, I would not, if I'm doing just a timed intercourse or an IUI, I would not like to disturb or do anything about it and just give her some NSAIDs. But if I'm going for IVF or for any other reason, like if semen analysis is abnormal or any other abnormality, I have to go for an ART procedure, then I would think about reducing the size of fibroid a little bit. Or maybe because she is a young patient, not the duration of infertility might not be too much. So I would do a pickup for her, give her some suppression either with mifepristone or GnRH agonist, and then do a transfer. Had it been a patient who is 35, 36 or 38 years old, I would advise her for a myomectomy first and then go ahead with her ART procedure.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Devdeep Banerjee from Bardhaman, please.
As this patient is having only a single intramural fibroid of 4 cm, probably she may not suffer from infertility only because of this fibroid. So, if she is not having any infertility symptoms, I will only manage her that complaint. That means the dysmenorrhea and all this. So I will go for NSAID first. And if the patient is not willing for pregnancy right now, or she is having a child or something like that, then I can go for this medical management of fibroid. That means I can go for a mifepristone for 3 to 6 months.
Now, what are the different modalities of treatment of the patient of infertile with symptomatic myometry? Now, Dr. Jamini Agarwal, please.
So the same thing, if she's a symptomatic myoma and she's infertile, I would like to give her symptomatic treatment first with NSAIDs. If she can delay her pregnancy, then I would like to give her some treatment like mifepristone.
Now, which treatment you will choose in this case? Which treatment you will choose?
This case. So in this case, because she is a young female, I would like to give her NSAIDs and pain relief because she's not having any menorrhagia. She's just having dysmenorrhea. So NSAIDs, and then would like to go for a timed intercourse and an IUI. If I have to go for an ART procedure, I would do a pickup, give her some medical treatment at that time with mifepristone or with GnRH agonist for 2 to 3 months, and then go ahead with the transfer. In case if that treatment fails, if that IVF cycle fails, then I would consider to do a myomectomy and then go ahead with the next transfer. So initially for the timed intercourse or for an IUI, I would not do anything, just a pain relief with NSAIDs. And if she has time, I would give her mifepristone just for a symptomatic relief when other causes are ruled out. Sir, I would like to add here that after we have investigated it thoroughly and after we have mapped the fibroid, we will know whether the fibroid is causing any distortion in the endometrial cavity or no. Since she is an infertile lady, if I get a fibroid which is distorting the endometrial cavity, I would first like to go ahead with surgery for removal of the fibroid and then go ahead with treating her infertility. But if the fibroid is not distorting the endometrial cavity in any way, then I would not do much to it. For symptomatic relief, as Dr. Yamini said, I would just like to go for NSAIDs and pain relief and everything because the size of the fibroid is not that much. So if she is relieved with the pain relief medications and the fibroid is not distorting my cavity, I would just go ahead with whatever treatment is required for infertility, depending upon after evaluating the other causes of infertility.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Amit Datta, what do you think about the treatment of this case? Amit Datta, please, from Bardwan.
Hello.
Can you hear? Now, what is the treatment of this lady who has got a single small fibroid?
Excuse me, sir, because of the network problem, I could not get to the whole case. There was a break in the voice. Hello.
Huh?
Hello.
Dr. Paul, can you sum up? Because of the network, I could not get the whole case.
Yeah, a
Can you just give me a
23-year-old
summary of the
woman.
case, then I can carry on.
Yeah, a 23
This is your case.
A 23-year-old woman complained of dysmenorrhea, pelvic pain, and low back pain. Examination revealed a single intramural fibroid of 4.4 centimeters. And what is the treatment option?
Treatment option, as already discussed, that since the fibroid is 4.4 centimeters. Hello, can you hear me?
What is the treatment of your choice in this case?
Since the fibroid size you said is 4.4, medical management definitely will be better.
Yeah.
And
Think also
fibro-
same thing.
yes, and fibro is mifepristone, definitely 25 milligram will be ideal in this case, and hopefully she'll improve her symptoms.
So actually, as it is a case of infertility, you are telling, so we will have to go for other investigations of infertility also in this case.
Yes, sir.
Because
Yes.
fibroid may not be the cause of infertility.
Mm.
So endometriosis may be the cause of infertility. PID may be the cause of infertility. If it is endometriosis or adenomyosis, it may be the cause of these drugs, particularly the SPRM, that is mifepristone, generic analog. It is helpful for both the conditions, like the in fibroid uterus, adenomyosis, endometriosis, all the. So our goal is for medical treatment, not for surgical treatment, because
Right.
its size is less than 4 centimeter only here. So
Yes.
we will allow after 3 to 6 months of administration of the medical treatment, we will allow the patient for natural coitus and for natural conception after exclusion of other causes of infertility.
Mhm.
So if there is any problem, we will have to think for other modalities.
Okay, thank you. Now the case number 2, a 48-year-old woman with heavy menstrual bleeding and dysmenorrhea. Ultrasound revealed 2 intramural fibroids, 3.3 centimeter and 3.6 centimeter. And she wants to preserve her uterus and doesn't want surgery. Now, my first question. Now, investigation hemoglobin is 10.3 gram, pelvic ultrasound, urinary bladder, normal in size, shape and distension with no lesion, and uterus normal size 74 by 46 millimeter with myometrium 4.5 thick and well-defined lesions in the endometrium 3.3 and 3.6 centimeter. Both ovaries appear normal. Now, what is your final diagnosis? And Dr. Shatabdi Devi from Siliguri.
Sir, yes. Sir, the cause for her menorrhagia in this case, it could be two things, sir. It could either be related to the fibroid, although the size of the fibroid is not a lot, there are 2 fibroids, or it could just be a hormonal change because she is in the perimenopausal age group.
Yeah.
So again, my diagnosis would be any of the 2, sir. It could either be the fibroid, so I will have to, of course, do a mapping of the fibroid and see where are the fibroids. If they are intramural fibroids, the fibroids can be a cause for her menorrhagia.
Yeah.
But the menorrhagia could also be due to just because of she's in the perimenopausal state and she will be having the hormonal changes. So I would have to decide between these 2, sir, for her cause. It could be either perimenopausal bleeding, dysfunctional uterine bleeding due to her age, or the menorrhagia could be due to the fibroids.
Now, Dr. Devdut Banerjee, please from Bardhaman.
As I have seen that both the fibroids are submucous. I mean, either it is grade 0 or grade 1. It may cause that amount of bleeding, despite being the endometrium is thin, 4.5 millimeter. So probably the fibroid, that is the submucous fibroid, is the cause of this bleeding. So I would go for, I would try for hysteroscopic myomectomy. That would have been the best choice of treatment in this case, as because the endometrium is normal.
Next question. Which types of myoma are classified as submucous variety in FIGO classification? Dr. Amit Datta, please, from Bardhaman.
Sir?
Dr. Amit Datta from Bardhaman. Which type of myoma are classified as submucous variety in FIGO classification?
So this is for FIGO classification. It is
Yeah.
type 1, 2, and it is they classified it as pedunculated intracavitary. If it is 1, then if it is intramural below 50% and it is above 50%, it is type 2 intramural. It is type 2 intramural according to this classification.
Okay.
In this
Now,
other investigations we want to perform, other than the ultrasound, we can have an also I can MRI. Some people advise MRI. If you do an MRI of the pelvis, you can also get to the exact picture and the extent of the fibroid.
okay, thank you, Dr. Datta. Now, Dr. Kamini Agarwal, what other investigations you perform? What Dr. Datta said, will be, or anything else you wanted to make?
Sir, I would even like to perform her complete blood count to see, because she's having menorrhagia. So I want to look at her hemoglobin status and even a thyroid level. Also, I want to see because she's having increased bleeding. So these are the other investigations which I would like to do. And the other routine investigations as she is 48 years of age and in perimenopausal age group.
Okay, thank you. Now, next question, is there any role of sampling of uterine endometrium by hysteroscope or DNC in this case? Dr. Amita Upal.
So as the patient is in perimenopausal age group, so in that case, it has role and the patient has menorrhagia with submucous type of fibroid. And we will have to exclude whether the patient has any association with endometrial carcinoma or not in this age group. So for the reason, if hysteroscope is available, I will go for hysteroscopic diagnosis and targeted biopsy. And at the same time, if there is no hysteroscope is available, we can go for DNC for endometrial sampling to exclude the endometrial carcinoma. You will have to, because in 3% of cases, you will get the endometrial carcinoma in association with fibroid uterus. And if it is diagnosed as endometrial carcinoma, then we will have to go for Th plus ratio and pelvic lymphadenectomy.
Thank you, Dr. Pal. Now, next question, what are the different modalities of treatment of fibroid uterus in premenopausal age group? Dr. Amit Datta, please, from Bardhaman. Dr. Datta, please. What are the different modalities of treatment of fibroid uterus at perimenopausal age group?
Dr. Amit Datta, please unmute
Doctor?
yourself. Yeah.
In perimenopausal age group,
Yeah.
if you fibroid is there, after the investigations are done, then the management usually, if patient does not, if the menorrhagia symptoms are within the control limits, if the anemia is corrected and thyroid problems are not there, then medical therapies like levonorgestrel, usually we advise initially to start with, followed by the Mirena IUCD is often Mirena IUDs we use, and also GnRH, some amount of GnRH analogs are used to treat the symptomatic fibroid. We have seen also that modulators, progesterone modulators are also used, and we can also have some amount of response with that. In case if that fails, then we go for surgical therapy. Either we go for laparoscopic myomectomy, or we go for total, if patient is willing to forego her uterus and she is completed her family, we can go for total laparoscopic hysterectomy.
Okay, thank you. Now, Dr.
In-
Shatabdi,
one more thing. In view of the cost of uterine artery embolization, since it is very costly affair, many of the patients can't afford uterine artery embolization or any other high-tech treatment. So this sort of treatment with low-cost treatment, if she responds to the medical therapy, fine. If she doesn't respond, then we go for hysterectomy. Either we go for a normal open hysterectomy or a laparoscopic hysterectomy.
Thank you, Dr. Datta. Now, Dr. Shatabdi from Siliguri, which treatment do you follow?
Sir, if a patient like this comes to me, of course, the best would be, since she's completed her family, she's 48. After doing a sampling, I would just go for a hysterectomy. But since she's not willing for a hysterectomy in our case, I would prefer the GnRH analog more than the mifepristone, sir. I would personally, because GnRH analog is going to create a menopausal-like state, and she is anyways in the perimenopausal period. So maybe with 2 or 3 monthly doses, or a couple of 3 monthly doses, like the 11.25 doses for 1 or 2 couple of doses, maybe in the time she is anyways going to remain amenorrheic with GnRH, and in the meanwhile, she may herself achieve amenorrhea. She may achieve menopause. So then I guess for me personally, GnRH analog in a perimenopausal female like this, who's not willing for a surgery, would be ideal, sir.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Amita Upal, what is your view?
So you are correct to some extent. You are correct that we will go for medical management, particularly if the patient is in perimenopausal age group, because menopause is forthcoming. So if we add any medical treatment and if the response is better, And if the patient goes in menopause, so better to give medical treatment. But if in any case medical treatment fails, or I have told you, if there is any diagnosis of the endometrial carcinoma, then you will have to go for surgical steps.
So thank you very much. Now, Dr. Udan Sarkar, please, for the next two cases.
Sir, can you excuse me, sir, please? My father-in-law is not well. He has already had a cardiac arrest, so I have to move out little bit, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I
Thank you.
request-
You have completed the panel. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Udan. See you.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. You have more serious causes. Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Let me share my screen. Dr. Sushanta Das, if you can please leave
Sir,
your
please
screen.
stop sharing.
Please stop sharing your screen so that I can share my own screen.
Sir, on the top, there is a stop share option.
On the top, there will be a stop share
On the
option.
top right hand in red color. Red color will be the stop share.
Hey, screen
এই
sharing.
screen share টা বন্ধ করো।
Screen share টা বন্ধ।
Sir, on the top, you move the cursor and there is a stop share option, sir, in red color.
টপ শেয়ারে মারলেই বন্ধ হয়ে যাবে।
স্যার অ্যারোটা একদম উপরে নিয়ে যান সুশান্ত স্যার, অ্যারোটা উপরে নিয়ে গেলেই তো স্টপ শেয়ার আসবে।
Is it all right?
No.
Huh?
No, sir, no. Sir, just move the cursor up.
কার্সারটা স্যার উপরে নিয়ে যান।
ও screen share করবে না। এই screen টা off করো। আমাদের এটা off করে দাও।
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Sir, yeah, I have done it, sir. Just one minute. Dr. Udan, can you just share screen?
Yeah,
Is it going good?
I'll share my screen now.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see it, sir. Please continue.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, very good afternoon, all my panelists. Dr. Amitabh Pal, very pleased to meet you, even it be digitally. Dr. Debdut Banerjee, and my own colleagues, Dr. Jamini and Dr. Shatabdi. So we'll proceed with the cases. Here I come to case number 3. A 27-year-old infertile woman, infertile is the word, but complaining of, once again, all the features of AUB, heavy menstrual bleeding, dysmenorrhea, painful menstruation, pelvic pain and dyspareunia as well. And examination revealed a small interstitial fibroid, submucosal fibroid. She had come with an ultrasound where the specific size wasn't mentioned, but then they have mentioned submucosal fibroid of a certain size and low hemoglobin 9.9. And definitely infertile woman, she wishes to preserve her fertility. So best, I think, how would you like to assess the patient, Dr. Shatabdi? How will you like to assess this patient?
Yes. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
Good
Sir,
afternoon.
since,
Good afternoon.
yeah, she is an infertile patient, and I
Yeah.
have to, fortunately or unfortunately, deal with these patients day in, day out. What I would like to do when such a patient comes to me for the first time is, I would first I'd like to do a TVS myself, sir, right? Get a TVS done basically, because then I don't know what is the size of the fibroid, how much is it protruding in uterine cavity.
Exactly,
Also we don't.
yes.
So I would like to do a TVS, and if possible, I would also like to do a sonosalpingography along with the TVS, sir. Because doing a sonosalpingography will tell me exactly how much is the protrusion of the submucous fibroid inside the uterine cavity. So that will in turn help me to decide her further line of management. So the first me over here would be a TVS along with a sonosalpingography, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say a small interstitial fibroid, we may neglect it. Most likely her symptoms are because of submucosal fibroid. The infertility, heavy menstrual bleeding, painful bleeding, everything. So the New Zealand Australia Gynecological Society have said that the optimal imaging techniques of excluding cavity involvement of fibroids are either MRI, sonohysterography, as you very truly said, and hysteroscopy. But hysteroscopic assessment with hysteroscopy may at times underrepresent, because some mucosal lesions tend to get smaller because of raised intrauterine pressure causing temporary regression of the fibroid contour. So that is there. So you have to have an MRI done. MRI very clearly it details how much intramural involvement is there. And the Canadian Society says preoperative assessment of submucosal fibroid should include, in addition to an assessment of fibroid size and location within the uterine cavity, evaluation of the degree of invasion, and that is the most important for surgery, and thickness of residual myometrium to the serosa in that area. A combination of hysteroscopy and transvaginal ultrasound or hysterosonography are the modalities of choice, and submucosal fibroids are managed hysteroscopically. Okay, now let's come to the next question. Dr. Jamini, if I can ask you, would you like to assess for infertility before definitive treatment?
Yes, sir, definitely. I would like to assess for infertility. First of all, she's having a submucous fibroid.
Yes.
So we cannot neglect the adnexa. We have to make sure that it is, whether it is associated with endometriosis or not. So if we are doing an MRI, we will come to know whether any signs of endometriosis is there or not, along with the fibroid. And then I would like to do all the basic infertility investigations like the semen analysis and the basic investigations which we do, like thyroid and prolactin and a semen analysis. That is very much required, and an AFC to know what is her ovarian reserve. If all the things are fine, then I would like, then maybe the infertility is because of the submucous fibroid.
Now, what about a tubal status?
The tubal status also I would like to assess before doing before deciding what mode of treatment I would want to go to.
So since we'll be also since we would most likely do a TVS with sonosalpingography as well, apart we will get an idea. Yeah, we'll get an idea about the tubal status along with the sonosalpingography as well. So both the things will be covered over there.
Okay, thank you very much.
And then once all the other factors are ruled out, then I would like that maybe it is a submucous fibroid which is to be blamed for the infertility because it distorts the cavity and all. Then I would like to go for the definitive treatment for the submucous fibroid once other factors are ruled out.
Okay, thank you. So you want to have a detailed infertility investigation before going in for definitive treatment in this case. Now, Dr. Devdutt Banerjee, if I can please ask you, how will you counsel regarding improvement of symptoms and fertility following treatment? Because this patient will come and ask you, she has two problems, infertility and symptomatology, AUB, severe bleeding. So she will definitely want to know after treatment whether she can get pregnant, number one, and whether she will be relieved of her symptoms. How will you counsel, Dr. Devdutt Banerjee?
Sir, regarding the counseling of this patient, first about the symptoms, as because she is also having dyspareunia and pelvic pain, which might not be due to submucous fibroid. She may have associated endometriosis or adenomyosis. So that pain part should be counseled regarding if you ask her that your fibroid will be removed and your pain symptoms will be lost, that might not happen because of this associated endometriosis might be present in this patient. So menstrual symptom might be corrected, but pain symptoms, if the endometriosis is not treated, then that may persist. And regarding infertility, as because associated endometriosis may be there, the tubal factor may be affected. So only removing the fibroid doesn't necessarily guarantee her of her success.
What percentage would you like to give her for getting fertile
Sir?
following the surgery? If her tubes are fine, if her semen analysis is okay, what percentage around would you like to give her for getting pregnant post surgery?
That I cannot say
Around.
surely, sir.
Okay.
Percentage.
So we say normally around 40 to 50% conceived after treatment, after surgical treatment of myomectomy.
Okay.
So at least we can give her a reasonable percentage figure. So there is no guarantee that you will get pregnant, but you have a 40 to 50% chance of
Yes.
getting pregnant. Maybe we can counsel her in that way. Okay. Now, Dr. Amitava Pal, what are your plans for treatment?
What are the plans for treatment? So in this case, if the patient has infertility along with fibroid uterus, and I have seen that there is hemoglobin percent is 9.9%. So whatever may be the procedure we take before, we will have to correct the anemia first. And correction of the anemia can be first by iron supplementation, or because it's 9.9 something like that hemoglobin most probably. So we can use iron, or we can use correct intravenous iron.
Okay, we'll
Or-
correct the hemoglobin. Yes,
Yes, please.
we'll correct the hemoglobin and then
I will correct the hemoglobin.
yes.
And then we will try to reduce the size of the fibroid uterus. We'll try to size the size of the myoma by
Right.
medical treatment, because it will be very much helpful during operation. Why?
Okay.
Because if we go for any operative surgery, the myoma will be easier to clear from its pain. If we go for myomectomy, there will be least amount of bleeding at the time of surgery, and we can plan the surgical treatment. Because if we go for abdominal myomectomy by conventional method or by hysteroscopy
Sir,
or by laparotomy,
I would
so
like to, I would like to ask you for this case, submucous myoma, because she has a very small
as this
interstitial
patient has
myoma.
submucous myoma, first
Yeah.
of all by hystoscopy I have to see which type this one,
Yes.
0, 1 or 2. If
Okay.
in case of the 0 or 1, it is safe for hystoscopic surgery. But in cases of the 2, we'll have to plan whether we will go for laparoscopic myomectomy or hystoscopic myomectomy. So if we go for hystoscopic myomectomy, we will do it in 2 sittings. So first of all, we'll remove as much as possible. Then after menstruation or after 1 to 2 months, when the rest of the myoma is protruding into the endometrial cavity,
Okay,
then
two-stage.
we'll go for other. But before any adventure of hystoscopic surgery, we'll have to reduce the size and we'll have to reduce the plan so that the bleeding is less. So we can use generalized analog or microhysterectomy.
Okay, sir. Sir, there are two opinions regarding this also, whatever you said. SPRMs or GnRH analogs, definitely the size of the fibroid, I'm talking about, say, intramural fibroid, not the submucous variety. Before myomectomy, if we give, definitely it will reduce the size. But, I have done a few cases also where the planes, the ease with which we shell out the fibroids may not be that easy if we give prior GnRH analogs. I don't know whether you will agree with me with this or not, but I feel there may be, the fibroids won't be able to, we won't be able to shell out the fibroids as easily as we can do without preoperative GnRH analogs or, SPRMs. That is one of my viewpoints that I wanted to say. And, this is the guideline. I'm not going into the details. This is the guideline of the Canadian Society. But let me show you regarding hysteroscopic surgery, the step W criteria. I think, can you see? Yeah. If I can show you, this is from Williams. Step W criteria, it will give an idea how successful your hysteroscopic surgery can be. If the size is less, you have different points that you give, less than 2, 2 to 5, and more than 5. And then topography, low, middle, or upper. And then this is the base width means extent, STE. extent less than 1, 1 to 2, more than 2. That means more of the base is involved. And lastly, the penetration into the myometrium, 0, less than 50%, more than 50%. And whether it's if along lateral wall, then +1. Now, total points you have 0 to 4 group 1, 5 to 6 group 2, and 7 to 9 group 3. And surgical difficulty increases and as the point totals rise. So that is what I wanted to tell you. This is the step W criteria that is followed before hysteroscopic myomectomy, just to assess the feasibility of hysteroscopic surgery. Well, we'll go on into the last case. Not much of time left. A 29-year-old woman who is 3 months pregnant. Now we come to the last case, fibroid with pregnancy, 3 months pregnant. Scan reveals intramural fibroid sized 2.6 centimeters. No symptoms. She has absolutely no symptoms. It was revealed during ultrasound scan. She definitely wishes to continue with her pregnancy and she is worried whether it will cause any problems during her pregnancy. May I come back to again Dr. Jamini? Acha, this is the investigations. Hemoglobin is okay. Pelvic ultrasound, normal in size, shape, distension with no lesion. Uterus 12 weeks, live intrauterine fetus. Single well-defined intramural lesion, anterior wall 2.6 centimeters. Both ovaries appeared normal. Dr. Jamini,
Yes, sir.
how will you counsel her? She is worried. Whether it will cause any problems during her pregnancy and what will be the delivery like. I mean, whether it will cause any problems. How will you counsel her?
Sir, first of all, the fibroid is just 2.6 centimeters and it is an intramural fibroid. She has become pregnant spontaneously. The fibroid size is not that big. So that means I will counsel her that there is nothing to worry about it. There might be some kind of pain in the second half of pregnancy. There are some fibroids which undergo red degeneration, but that also there is nothing much to worry. There's just a conservative management which we have to do about it. So, and the fibroid size is not that big, which we have to worry. It is just 2.6 centimeters. So we will just continue with her pregnancy. I will tell her not to worry much about it and continue with her pregnancy.
No, she is worried whether her fibroids will grow or not. What will you tell her? She is worried.
So the fibroid usually will not grow. There can be some degeneration changes.
Okay.
In the
Sir,
pregnancy.
it can grow a little during pregnancy, sir. The fibroids will increase in size a little during pregnancy.
Very true. It
so
may
we have
grow.
to counsel
It may grow in the first trimester.
That it may
Yes.
grow, but it will, yes, sir. Yes.
So it may grow in the first trimester, but more often than not, fibroids either remain in the same size or may become smaller during pregnancy later on. Okay. So it's
Yes, sir,
a wrong concept that
3 months.
yes, it's a wrong
She's
concept.
already
that
crossed
it
3
goes-
months.
Yes, exactly. Now, let me come to Dr. Shatabdi. Can there be any complications during her pregnancy? She's worried about that also. She has a fibroid.
So the fibroid is very small, as we discussed. So it is unlikely to, and plus it's
Acha,
an
if the
intramural
if the fibroid was slightly bigger, say 4 centimeters.
Sir, even
Then-
then, I don't think so. Per se, it is going to cause any complication during her pregnancy. If it was a submucosal fibroid, it could have led to some complications. But since it's an intramural fibroid, I
Yes.
don't think that this is going to cause much of a problem during her pregnancy course, other than she having some bouts of pain because of the red degeneration, which can happen during
Yes,
pregnancy.
definitely.
Other
I
than that, there
understand.
is nothing much to worry about.
But
I think so.
if it's slightly a bigger fibroid, say around 5 centimeters, I'm not saying submucous, but intramural, definitely. Okay, around 5 centimeters fibroid. Can she have certain problems during her pregnancy or delivery or after delivery?
So
Or
she
during
can
C-
have some chances of abortion and preterm
And
labor.
she has in the anterior wall, it was mentioned, I think, ultrasound, anterior wall. Can she have any problems? Acha, what are the general problems that she may have? Definitely after delivery, she may have PPH, that we know. But, these are the problems that she may have if there is a significant fibroid. May not be with a 2.6 centimeters, but if she has a significant intramural fibroid also, these are the problems that she may have. Okay, I'm not going into the lower fibroids, but you know, placenta previa, preterm labor is definitely an
Preterm
option.
labor can happen, yes.
PPH is an option. Malposition,
So
if there is,
also, yeah.
yes, yes,
Sir,
please.
also during her cesarean section, if she lands up in a cesarean section for a
Yes.
bigger fibroid, the fibroid may come in the way of our incision
Exactly,
also. It
exactly.
can come in the way of our incision.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Amitava Pal, what are the treatment options in this case?
So if fibroid does not cause any problem, don't do anything. So keep as it is.
And if you are doing a cesarean
But still
section,
you have
would
to
you?
keep in mind that certain complications may occur.
Yes.
But still you will have to keep. But if there is degeneration of the fibroid, which generally occurs in moderate size of fibroid, particularly at the mid-trimester, particularly in the mid-trimester due to necrobitis or there is thrombosis of the blood vessels, then patient may come with acute abdomen.
Yes.
So in that case, if for any acute emergency abdominal condition, if you go for surgery and if you see, suppose I may think of acute appendicitis, I may think of intestinal obstruction, whatever may be acute condition. So if we open the abdomen, and in that case, if the fibroid is diagnosed or degenerated fibroid is diagnosed, then don't do anything. You will keep the patient
very true.
by symptomatic treatment.
But then what will you do at the time if you are doing a cesarean section, sir? Would you want to do anything to the fibroid?
At the time of cesarean section, if the placenta is on approachable site, particularly I am telling 45 is the placenta, sorry, fibroid is the approachable site, particularly on the skull line or adjacent to the skull line or at the anterior abdominal wall, then go for surgery. But if the fibroid is on the posterior wall or on the broad ligament, so don't do anything, please keep it. Because at the time, there will be more chances of hemorrhage. But one thing it is clear that before doing anything on fibroid, you will have to take the baby out. You will have to take the baby out, then you do anything.
Yes, sir. I totally agree with you. I'm also not in favor of removing or doing anything heroic during LSCS, but definitely if it comes in your way and it's absolutely accessible, you can think about doing a myomectomy, but that is definitely not the treatment of choice, I would like to say. Well, to summarize, thank you. To summarize, uterine fibroids are common benign tumors. There are different risk factors for development of fibroids, and guidelines, consensus statements recommend various approaches to treat fibroids, and treatment should be guideline directed, but an individualized approach should also be practiced. Thank you all for a very wonderful panel discussion. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Over to you.
Yes.
Khushbu.
Dr. Queen, you can just last few words.
Thank you so much, Shushanta sir and Udayananda, for this very, very wonderful panel. And I thank all the panelists, even our young girls, Shatabdi and Yamini also, who actually gave us a lot of insight into the various factors about it. And the questions were very nicely put by both our moderators. And Udayananda took up the later part, that is infertility and also fibroids during pregnancy. And as very rightly he pointed out that most of the patients are so scared that I have a fibroid in my pregnancy. Will it continue? Will we be able to continue it without complications? And in most of the cases, we can manage with an uneventful and good outcome. And so we have to keep counseling and reassuring our patients. At the same time, we cannot become complacent, as Udayananda has already explained. And those factors that are associated, there can be red degeneration, there can be placenta abruption or placenta previa. Even in some cases, there can be adherent inflata, or those kind of placentas can also be there. So we have to be on our guard to look out for those, but we should not unduly scare our patients so much. We will tell them that yes, there can be complications. Most probably in your case, if they will not be so, we will keep following you up. As Dada very nicely has pointed out, these are very, very important points. And our junior panelists, Shatabdi and Jamini, along with the senior panelists, have also done a very wonderful job of putting in their insights. And I thank you all for sparing your great time out here and very invaluable and precious time and giving us such wonderful take-home messages. And at the end, the pregnancy with fibroid was a very nice case. Thank you so much, Udayananda. And thank you, Sushanta sir, for all your inputs as well. And so we go back home enriched about a lot of knowledge about fibroids. And what we started with is that in most of the cases of fibroids nowadays can be managed to a great extent with medical therapy, and we have mifepristone in our basket, very easily available to us, especially in the perimenopausal age group, where we can buy time because she will enter menopause in a couple of months or years. And in the meanwhile, if instead of going for a surgery, if we can give her medical management and avoid the surgery altogether, that's something that will be a blessing for that woman, and we will be benefiting the society at large. And also in other cases, as we have already discussed in all of the panel cases, that even in cases of infertility, in so many other cases, we can try to shrink the size a little bit by giving a few months of the mifepristone medication. So mifepristone is a very good medication in our basket, and we can use it in many cases, usually without much complications. And otherwise, individually, we have to treat our cases as per their merit, where there is infertility. If it's a submucous fibroma, as Dada has already explained, then first of all, we have to remove that. If it's distorting the cavity, the fibroid mapping and all have been spoken very nicely by our juniors. And so we have to keep everything in mind. But yes, mifepristone is a very good medication in our basket, and wherever it is applicable, we should try to use the same and benefit our society at large. Thank you so much to all my seniors, Udayananda, Sushanta sir, all the senior panelists, and also the junior panelists. And last but not the least, I would like to thank Shubhajit and Khushbu from on behalf of Acumentis for presenting us with this wonderful session today. I go back home a much more enriched person. Oh, I stay home, sorry. Earlier we used to say go back home. Now we have to say I remain home much more enriched than what I was before.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank
It was
you, sir.
a wonderful session. And last but not the least, I request all of you, if anybody of you is interested to do a trial on fibroids,
Absolutely.
we are very much ready. Absolutely. Please contact our field person, and we would be. And finally, one last thing that on behalf of the company, I'll tell you that fibroid merits a usage of 3 months plus. I mean, 3 to 6 months is what we are looking for a minimum treatment. And now we are hearing 6 months or more treatment is also giving good results. So it's up to you how you judge it, how you use it. But we are open to trials by many of you, basically. Please contact us. We would be ready to do trials more of fibroids. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you
you,
so much,
thank you,
doctor.
Mr.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Shubhajit.
so
Thank
much,
Thank you,
everyone.
Khushbu. Thank you,
Thank
Queen.
you all, sir.
Nice
Thank
Sushanta
you.
sir, thank you. Thank
Once
you,
again,
Jamini,
thanking
Shatabdi.
Acumentis, Shubhajit, Khushbu,
Thank you.
Udayanda, Sushanta sir, and all our seniors and juniors. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Seeing
so much,
Dr.
ma'am.
Das after a
Thank you
long
all.
And
time.
thanking all the doctors who have spared their time for us, listening
Yeah,
to
yeah.
us. Thank you.
Thank
Thanking
you.
them as well. Thank you.
Yeah, hoping
Thank
to
you all.
soon physically. That
Yeah,
is-
let's hope so. Let's really hope so.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
doctors. Goodbye.